The period following Donald Trump's inauguration on January 20th, 2025, marked the beginning of his second, non-consecutive term. The first 100 days, ending April 29th, were characterized by an unprecedented volume of executive actions, a systematic effort to consolidate power within the executive branch, direct challenges to judicial and congressional authority, the targeting of perceived political opponents and independent institutions, and the installation of loyalists into key positions, often bypassing traditional norms and legal constraints. This analysis examines these developments chronologically on a week-by-week basis. Week 1, January 20th, 2025 to January 26th, 2025. Setting the tone: pardons, executive orders, and initial purges. Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2025. Donald Trump is sworn in as the 47th president. Immediately, he takes action signaling a break from precedent and an assertion of broad authority. Mass pardons, January 20th, 2025. Trump issues sweeping pardons for approximately 1,500 individuals charged or convicted in relation to the January 6, 2021 Capitol attack. This act rewards political allies and supporters involved in challenging the 2020 election outcome, undermining the legal process and accountability for the event. Executive Order Barrage, January 20th, 2025. Trump signs a record 26 executive orders on his first day. Key orders include defining sex as strictly binary, male and female, across the federal government, initiating the removal of non-binary recognition, such as halting X markers on passports, and framing gender identity issues as extremism. Asserting a new basis for federal hiring focused on dedication to our Constitution, widely interpreted as a mandate for personal loyalty to his agenda over merit or expertise. Aggressive immigration measures, blocking asylum seekers, reinstating the national emergency at the Mexico-US border, moving to designate drug cartels as terrorist organizations, and attempting to end birthright citizenship via executive fiat, challenging the 14th Amendment. Pre-inauguration financial move, January 17, 2025. Days before taking office, Trump launches his own meme coin with a $5 billion-plus market cap initially, that blurs the lines between public office and private enrichment from the outset, raising significant ethics concerns, particularly regarding the Foreign Emoluments Clause. Targeting independent oversight, January 24, 2025. Trump fires 17 independent inspectors general across various federal agencies. This move appears to violate federal law requiring 30 days notice to Congress and cripples crucial internal oversight mechanisms designed to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse. Targeting political opponents, pre-inauguration and ongoing. Even before January 20th, 2025, Trump revoked security clearances for around 50 former officials critical of him. Following the inauguration, he revoked security protection for former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, aide Brian Hook, John Bolton, and Dr. Anthony Fauci, despite known threats against them, explicitly framing it as targeting perceived adversaries. Targeting the media, January 22, 2025. The Trump-appointed Federal Communications Commission Chair, Brendan Carr, revives investigations into CBS, ABC, and NBC, but not Fox News over alleged bias, acting on prior threats to punish networks critical of Trump. Aggressive immigration enforcement begins January 22, 2025. The administration revokes 2011 guidance prohibiting immigration arrests by Immigration and Customs Enforcement in sensitive locations like schools, hospitals, and places of worship. Expansionist rhetoric. Trump reiterates interest in purchasing Greenland and annexing the Panama Canal, and muses publicly about Canada potentially becoming the 51st state, signaling a potentially aggressive and expansionist foreign policy stance early on. Pardon of Ross Ulbricht, January 21, 2025. Fulfilling a campaign promise, Trump grants a full pardon to the Silk Road founder. Pardons for anti-abortion protesters, January 23, 2025. Pardons are granted to 23 individuals convicted under the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. Analysis Week 1. The first week established a pattern of using executive power to reward loyalists through pardons, punish perceived enemies by revoking protections and clearances. Challenge constitutional norms with the Birthright Citizenship Executive Order. Dismantle oversight. Target critical media. Advance a socially conservative agenda through executive fiat, and hint at aggressive expansionist goals involving neighboring countries. The Trump coin launch signaled potential conflicts of interest, and self-enrichment would be features of the term. Week 2 0127 to 0202 2025. Weaponizing Justice, Attacking the Civil Service, and Funding Chaos. Targeting transgender rights via executive orders. A series of executive orders aim to roll back LGBTQ+ rights. Rescinding military inclusion on 0127, threatening funding for institutions providing gender-affirming care to minors on 0128, and threatening school funding for recognizing gender transitions on 0129. Weaponizing the Department of Justice, 0127. Trump directs the Attorney General to investigate the previous administration for weaponization of the federal government, essentially ordering the Department of Justice to pursue his political grievances. More than a dozen Department of Justice officials who worked on cases against Trump are fired. A special project is created to investigate prosecutors of January 6th rioters, and a weaponization working group is formed to review officials who investigated Trump previously, reporting directly to the White House. Loyalty tests, affirming January 6th was an inside job and the 2020 election was stolen, are implemented for key national security and law enforcement hires, establishing DOGE and attacking civil service. Trump establishes the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, led by Elon Musk, tasked with cutting federal spending. Musk allies are installed in the Office of Personnel Management and the General Services Administration. On 0128, the Office of Personnel Management offers a deferred resignation program, mirroring Musk's tactics at Twitter, pressuring federal employees to leave. On 0131, Trump declares he will nullify federal employee union contracts. Musk gains access to the United States Department of the Treasury's payment systems and sensitive personnel data, raising national security and conflict of interest alarms. Targeting consumer protection, January 28. Trump issued an executive order reviewing Consumer Financial Protection Bureau powers and directing the Office of Management and Budget funding cuts, aiming to significantly curtail the agency's regulatory enforcement capabilities. Federal funding freeze attempt 0127, the Office of Management and Budget issues, Memo M2513, ordering a temporary pause on all activities related to obligation or disbursement of all federal financial assistance for programs related to foreign aid, NGOs, diversity, equity and inclusion, woke gender ideology, and the Green New Deal, affecting potentially 2,600 programs. This sparks chaos and legal challenges. Judge Lauren Alican issues a temporary block before the freeze fully begins. Freeze memo retracted. Intent remains. 0129. The Office of Management and Budget withdraws M2513, but the White House insists the funding freeze remains in effect, creating further confusion and legal jeopardy. Targeting public media. 0129. Federal Communications Commission Chair Carr orders an investigation into underwriting announcements on National Public Radio and public broadcasting service stations, and recommends Congress defund them, aligning with Project 2025 goals he co-authored. Targeting military leadership, 0129. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth suspends former chairman of the Joint Chiefs Mark Milley's security clearance and initiates a review for potential demotion. Milley's official portrait had already been removed from a Pentagon hallway. Further purges, 0124 onward. Trump fires all Democratic members of the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, preventing quorum. He also fires members of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the National Labor Relations Board, over 160 National Security Council staff, and 56 senior officials at the United States Agency for International Development for perceived disloyalty or attempts to thwart his priorities. First legislation signed, 0129. Trump signs the Locke-and-Riley Act, related to immigration enforcement. Analysis Week 2. this week saw a significant escalation in weaponizing the Department of Justice against political rivals, a direct assault on the independence and structure of the federal civil service through DOGE and union-busting efforts, and a chaotic attempt to impose spending priorities via a legally dubious funding freeze. The targeting of specific groups such as transgender individuals and public media continued, alongside purges of officials deemed disloyal across multiple agencies and initial moves to weaken consumer financial protections. Week 3, 0203 to 0209, 2025, culture wars, tariff threats, and legal pushback. Continued anti-transgender actions, 0205. Trump signs an executive order attempting to ban transgender women and girls from participating in women's sports. Anti-Christian bias. Task Force 0206. Following the National Prayer Breakfast, Trump signs an executive order creating a task force led by Attorney General Pam Bondi to halt perceived anti-Christian targeting, potentially using religious freedom claims to challenge existing civil rights protections or diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Tariff diplomacy, 0203. After threatening 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, announced 0201, Trump pauses their implementation for 1 month after the countries reportedly agree to stricter drug trafficking measures, showcasing the use of economic threats as leverage. The 10% China tariff proceeded. Legal challenge to funding freeze, 0201. District Judge John J. McConnell Jr. orders the administration to temporarily halt the federal funding freeze in 22 states, plus the District of Columbia, finding no federal law would authorize the executive's unilateral action here. Border claims 0206. The U.S. Border Patrol chief claims illegal border crossings are down nearly 90% since inauguration, a statistic used to bolster the administration's narrative but potentially subject to interpretation or short-term fluctuation. USAID funding confusion, 0206. Secretary of State Marco Rubio states that waivers exempt essential humanitarian aid from the USAID funding freeze. However, reports emerge suggesting these waivers are not being effectively implemented due to staffing disruptions and DOGE's control over payment systems. Analysis Week 3. The administration continued its focus on divisive social issues while employing aggressive trade tactics. The first significant judicial pushback against the broad funding freeze emerged, highlighting the legal vulnerabilities of the administration's approach. Discrepancies between official statements and reported realities, such as USAID aid, suggested operational chaos or deliberate obstruction. Week 4, February 10, 2025 to February 16, 2025. Judicial Defiance, Media Suppression, and Public Health Disarray. Interference in Prosecution. February 10, 2025. The Department of Justice directs federal prosecutors to drop charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams, citing interference with his ability to govern, just as the administration was negotiating with Adams on immigration enforcement. 7 prosecutors resign in protest, alleging an improper political deal. Defiance of court order, February 10, 2025. Judge McConnell finds evidence the administration continues to improperly freeze federal funds despite his earlier order and demands immediate restoration, citing irreparable harm. This indicates ongoing defiance of judicial rulings. Loyalty demands intensify, early February. Elon Musk demands federal employees submit detailed weekly work reports via email, stating failure to respond will be taken as a resignation, imposing private sector pressure tactics onto the federal workforce. Department of Justice memos threaten opponents of DOGE's cost-cutting with pursuit to the ends of the earth. DOGE justifies cuts with unverified claim. February 12th. DOGE publicly asserts, without verifiable evidence, that tens of millions of dead people are receiving Social Security benefits. They use this to demand wider access and SSA budget cuts. Attacks on judiciary escalate. Following rulings against the administration, such as Judge Engelmayer blocking DOGE Treasury access later in February, Trump states, "Judges shouldn't be allowed such power," echoed by Vice President Vance. The White House press secretary labels judges judicial activists, denying a constitutional crisis exists within the executive branch and blaming the judiciary. Musk calls for an immediate wave of judicial impeachments. Targeting media intensifies. Associated Press journalists are barred from White House press briefings for using the standard name Gulf of Mexico instead of Trump's preferred Gulf of America. The administration labels the AP's usage lies. Targeting corporate diversity, February 12, 2025. The Federal Communications Commission launches investigations into Comcast, parent of NBC News, over its diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Public health agencies' targeted mass layoffs hit the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, with around 1,300 employees fired on February 14, 2025, including the entire first-year class of the Epidemic Intelligence Service. The CDC is ordered to stop collaborating with the World Health Organization. Purges of CDC websites containing data on HIV, LGBTQ, plus health and youth health begin. Publication of the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report is halted for the first time since 1960 due to communication freezes. Contentious foreign policy. A meeting between Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky ends abruptly after Trump's demands regarding mineral resources and lack of security guarantees lead to tensions. U.S.-Russia peace talks begin in Saudi Arabia. Analysis Week 4. This week showed blatant interference in the justice system, open defiance of court orders concerning the funding freeze, and direct rhetorical attacks on the judiciary's legitimacy. DOJ amplified its controversial role by making unsubstantiated claims about waste in Social Security to justify its actions. Media suppression escalated, and the public health infrastructure suffered major blows through layoffs and data purges at the CDC, potentially compromising national health security. The administration's approach to allies like Ukraine appeared transactional and coercive. Week 5, 0217 to 2/23. Symbolic Actions, Judicial Clashes, and Military Purge. Symbolic EOs versus Systemic Cuts. Trump signs an executive order promoting access to in vitro fertilization on 0219 and another on healthcare cost transparency on 0225. These contrast sharply with the broader funding freezes and agency disruptions affecting health programs. Judicial clash over DOJ power. Judge Paul Engelmayer blocks DOJ from accessing Treasury payment systems. This prompts the administration's sharp rebukes of judicial authority mentioned in Week 4. Consolidating control at USAID. The USAID Director of Security is put on administrative leave after trying to prevent DOJ members from accessing restricted areas and sensitive classified information for which they allegedly lacked clearance. DOJ members gain control, including the ability to lock out staff. Musk tweets USAID is a criminal organization. Time for it to die. Legal challenge to media ban 0221. The Associated Press files a lawsuit challenging the White House access restrictions as a violation of the First Amendment. Purging military leadership 0221. Trump abruptly dismisses Charles Q. Brown Jr. as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, despite Brown having been originally nominated by Trump. Analysis Week 5. The administration engaged in symbolic gestures like the IVF executive order, while continuing systemic actions with profound impacts, such as the USAID takeover and CDC-NIH disruptions. The confrontation with the judiciary intensified, moving from defiance of specific orders to challenging the legitimacy of judicial review itself. The dismissal of the top military officer suggested a desire for absolute loyalty at the highest levels of the armed forces. Week 6, February 24th, 2025 to March 2nd, 2025. Wealth-based immigration, more layoffs. Gold card visas announced, February 25th, 2025. Trump announces plans for residency permits for wealthy immigrants willing to pay $5 million, shifting immigration policy towards favoring wealth. Healthcare transparency EO signed, February 25th, 2025. Trump signs the executive order aiming to improve healthcare cost transparency. Scientific agency layoffs begin February 27, 2025. Layoffs commence at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, with 880 employees, around 5%, fired. Chaos ensues at other agencies like the Department of Energy and Department of Agriculture, as scientists working on critical projects such as nuclear security and avian flu are fired and then subject to clumsy rehiring attempts after their access is cut off. Analysis Week 6. The administration introduced policies favoring wealthy immigrants while continuing the disruptive pattern of mass layoffs in crucial scientific agencies, indicating a lack of strategic planning or disregard for operational consequences in pursuit of workforce reduction goals. Week 7, March 3, 2025 to March 9, 2025. Trade wars, legal setbacks, and Supreme Court intervention. Tariffs imposed, trade war escalates. On March 4, 2025, the paused tariffs on Mexico and Canada, 25% with 10% on Canadian energy, are implemented, alongside an additional 10% on China, totaling 20%. Canada and China immediately retaliate with their own tariffs. Mexico plans theirs. This marks a significant escalation into a multi-front trade war. Targeted law firm capitulates. Paul, Weiss, Rifkind, Wharton, and Garrison agrees to administration demands, including dropping DEI and providing $40 million in free legal services to avoid a punitive executive order. This demonstrates the effectiveness of the pressure campaign against the legal profession. Judicial reversal on firings. On March 4, 2025, a U.S. district judge orders the reinstatement of Kathy Harris, a removed Democratic member of the United States Merit Systems Protection Board, finding her removal illegal. Supreme Court rules on funding freeze. On March 5, 2025, the Supreme Court rules 5-4 that the Trump administration must comply with Judge Amir Ali's earlier order from February 13, 2025, paused by Chief Justice Roberts, to continue USAID contracts and grants that were active before the freeze. This delivers a major legal blow to the administration's attempt to unilaterally halt congressionally appropriated funds. Analysis Week 7. The administration fully launched its aggressive tariff policy, risking major economic disruption. While one law firm succumbed to pressure, the judiciary delivered significant setbacks regarding the legality of firings and the broad funding freeze, indicating institutional checks were still functioning, albeit under strain. Week 8, March 10, 2025 to March 16, 2025. Assault on law firms, mass deportations, judicial defiance intensifies. Expanding attack on the legal profession. Trump issues executive orders targeting Jenner and Block and Wilmer Cutler, Pickering Hale and Dorr, firms employing lawyers involved in previous investigations, like the Mueller probe. Judicial orders against firings. On March 12, 2025 and March 13, 2025, Judge Beryl Howell issues a temporary restraining order against parts of the Perkins-Coie executive order, calling it likely unconstitutional and chilling to the legal profession. Judge William Alsop orders the rehiring of fired probationary employees across multiple departments, calling the administration's performance rationale a gimmick and a lie. Judge James Bredar issues an even broader order requiring the rehiring of 24,000 workers across 12 departments and 6 agencies due to lack of proper notice and false rationale, partial compliance and defiance on firings. The administration appeals the rehiring orders, but begins placing rehired employees on administrative leave with pay, arguably defying the spirit of the rulings requiring reinstatement to their posts, as later clarified by Judge Alsop. Dismantling USAID formalized. On March 10, 2025, Secretary Rubio announces the cancellation of 83%, approximately 5,200, of USAID programs, with the remaining 1,000 to be moved under the Department of State. Document destruction ordered at USAID. On March 11, 2025, USAID's acting executive secretary instructs colleagues to shred or burn classified and personnel documents as the agency is dismantled, ruling on USAID payments. On March 10, 2025, Judge Ali orders the administration to make back payments for completed USAID projects at a rapid pace, 300 per day. Mass deportations under Alien Enemies Act. On March 15, 2025, Trump invokes the archaic 1798 Alien Enemies Act to target Venezuelan migrants, alleging gang membership, defiance of court order on deportations. On March 15, 2025, Chief Judge James Boasberg issues a temporary restraining order against deportations under the Act and explicitly orders any planes in the air carrying deportees to return. The administration proceeds with deporting around 250 people on 3 planes to El Salvador, claiming the verbal order wasn't binding or the planes were already outside U.S. airspace. Attacks on judiciary reach new heights. From March 15, 2025 onward, Trump calls Judge Boasberg crooked and demands his impeachment. Chief Justice John Roberts issues a rare public rebuke, stating disagreement is not grounds for impeachment. Trump's border czar Tom Homan vows continued deportations daily, stating, "I don't care what the judges think." Withdrawal of CDC nominee. On March 13, 2025, the administration quietly withdraws its nominee for CDC director just before the confirmation hearing. Analysis Week 8. This week witnessed an alarming confluence of authoritarian actions. A full-scale assault on specific law firms deemed adversarial, blatant defiance of multiple court orders regarding firings and deportations, direct personal attacks on a federal judge coupled with calls for impeachment, the formal beginning of dismantling a major federal agency, USAID, accompanied by orders to destroy records, and the use of an archaic law for mass deportations based on questionable group affiliations. Week 9, 0317 to 0323, 2025. Entrenching Defiance, Potential Conflicts, Continued Rhetoric of Defiance. Administration officials like Tom Homan continue public declarations of intent to proceed with deportations despite court orders. On 0319, Attorney General Pam Bondi publicly questions Judge Boasberg's right to ask for flight details and asserts judges have no power to order the administration to stop, accusing them of meddling. Musk's Pentagon visit scrutinized. On 0321, Elon Musk visits the Pentagon for a meeting changed from a China briefing to an efficiency discussion with Secretary Hegseth, following reports raising concerns about Musk's potential conflicts of interest due to his business dealings in China. Trump dismisses the concerns as fake. Signal chat leak. Senior officials, including Vice President Vance, DNI Gabbard, CIA Director Ratcliffe, and Secretary of Defense Hegseth, used the private Signal app to discuss imminent military strikes against Houthis in Yemen. Details, including specific timings and assets, are leaked when National Security Advisor Michael Waltz accidentally adds the Atlantic's editor to the chat. This reveals disregard for secure communications protocols and government record-keeping laws. Analysis Week 9. The administration doubled down on its defiance of the judiciary concerning deportations. High-level security breaches occurred due to improper communication practices, raising questions about competence and adherence to protocol. Potential conflicts of interest involving key administration allies like Musk continued to surface. Week 10, March 24th, 2025 to March 30th, 2025. Broadening legal threats, more judicial blocks, DOJ obscurity, general threat against legal profession. Trump issues a presidential memorandum threatening lawyers and firms more broadly if they file frivolous, unreasonable, and vexatious litigation against the administration, as judged by the Attorney General, including threats of revoked clearances and debarment from federal contracts. This is seen as a significant escalation aimed at intimidating the entire legal profession from challenging government actions. Further judicial blocks on targeting firms. March 28, 2025. Jenner and Block and WilmerHale file lawsuits challenging the executive orders against them. Judges John Bates and Richard Leon issue TROs respectively, blocking the orders. DOJ transparency reduced, late March. DOJ stops listing details of canceled USAID contracts on its public wall of receipts, citing legal reasons, making its cost-saving claims harder to verify. Risky technical project initiated, late March. Reports emerge that DOJ is planning a rapid migration of the Social Security Administration's core COBOL code to a modern language within months, a timeline experts deem dangerously short for such a critical system. Analysis Week 10. The administration broadened its attack from specific law firms to a general threat against legal challenges. While courts continued to block the targeted executive orders, the wider chilling effect likely intensified. DOGE operated with decreasing transparency while initiating potentially reckless technical overhauls of critical government systems. Week 11, 0331 to 0406, 2025. Economic shocks, academic pushback, limited aid restoration. Liberation Day tariffs. Trigger market crash 0402. Trump announces a 10% universal import tariff and higher rates on 57 specific trading partners. Markets react sharply negatively, entering correction territory, with significant drops in stocks and unusual sell-offs in the bond market, attributed to a loss of investor confidence in U.S. stability. Academic condemnation 0331. The Board of the Association of American Universities issues a statement condemning the politically motivated withholding of research funding as a dangerous and counterproductive precedent. Limited USAID aid restored early April. USAID announces the restoration of food aid grants via the UN World Food Program to 14 nations, including Lebanon and Syria, but notably excludes Yemen and Afghanistan, citing concerns funding could benefit terrorist groups. Analysis Week 11. The administration's aggressive tariff policy caused significant immediate economic disruption and market instability. Resistance from the academic community solidified against the administration's pressure tactics on universities. The partial restoration of USAID funding appeared selective and politically motivated. Week 12, 0407 to 0413, 2025, Supreme Court ruling, continued media access defiance, ethics questions. Supreme Court ruling on Alien Enemies Act 0407. The U.S. Supreme Court rules 5-4 that the administration can use the 1798 Alien Enemies Act for deportations in the specific case of alleged Venezuelan gang members, but crucially requires that detainees be given timely notice and opportunity to seek habeas corpus relief. This provides a partial victory but imposes procedural constraints. Defiance of court order on media access 0408 and 0413. Federal Judge Trevor McFadden grants the Associated Press a preliminary injunction, ordering the White House to lift access restrictions on 0408. Days later, on 0413, the administration defies the court order by blocking the AP from covering a meeting between Trump and the Salvadoran president in the Oval Office. Market manipulation scrutiny 0409. Trump encourages investors to buy stocks hours before pausing tariffs, an action that caused markets to soar. This timing prompts scrutiny from Democrats and ethics experts regarding potential market manipulation or insider trading. Analysis Week 12. The Supreme Court offered a nuanced ruling on deportations, upholding the use of the controversial law but mandating due process safeguards. The administration demonstrated continued open defiance of a direct federal court order regarding press access. Ethical questions surrounding the president's market-moving statements intensified. Week 13, 0414 to 0420, 2025. Bureaucratic hurdles, university pressure mounts. New Social Security hurdles, 0414. The Social Security Administration implements tighter in-person identity verification requirements for certain benefits applications, potentially creating barriers for applicants, especially as the administration closes field offices and lays off staff. Targeting elite universities escalates. Federal funding freezes are applied or threatened against Cornell University, Northwestern University, and Harvard University, with $2.3 billion frozen for Harvard. Harvard rejects administration demands regarding curriculum, hiring, and admissions policies, including viewpoint diversity audits, and sues the government to block the funding freeze. The administration asks the Internal Revenue Service to revoke Harvard's tax-exempt status. Analysis Week 13. The administration implemented bureaucratic changes potentially hindering access to social benefits while significantly escalating its pressure campaign against major research universities, moving from funding threats to direct legal and financial attacks, including the IRS referral. Week 14, April 21st, 2025 to April 29th, 2025. Collective condemnation from higher education. University presidents unite in protest, April 22, 2025. The American Association of Colleges and Universities publishes a statement signed by over 150 university and college presidents decrying the administration's unprecedented government overreach and political interference in higher education. End of the first 100 days, April 29, 2025. The initial period concludes. Analysis Week 14. The sustained assault on higher education prompted a strong, collective condemnation from university leadership across the country, signifying widespread alarm within the academic community about threats to academic freedom and institutional autonomy. Donald Trump's first 100 days were marked by a rapid and aggressive assertion of executive authority characteristic of authoritarian consolidation. Key patterns included use of executive power, reliance on a high volume of executive orders to bypass Congress and implement controversial policies quickly, such as those on immigration, gender, and loyalty, targeting institutions, systematic attacks on checks and balances, including the judiciary, with defiance of orders and personal attacks, the media, with access restrictions and investigations, independent oversight, with IG firings, and the federal civil service, with loyalty tests, mass layoffs, and union busting. Weaponizing government. Using the Department of Justice and other agencies to pursue political grievances, investigate opponents, and enforce loyalty. Prioritizing loyalty. Rewarding political allies with pardons and purging those deemed disloyal across the military, civil service, and oversight bodies. Challenging norms and laws. Actions frequently tested or appeared to violate established legal precedents, constitutional norms like birthright citizenship and judicial review, and statutory requirements, such as notice for firings and funding freezes. Consolidating power creation of parallel structures like DOGE under unelected allies such as Musk to bypass or control traditional agencies and processes. Suppression and chilling effects. Actions against the media, law firms, universities, and civil servants created an environment of intimidation aimed at suppressing dissent and opposition, blurring public office and private gain. The Dollar Trump coin launch and potential conflicts of interest surrounding DOGE and cabinet members suggested a disregard for traditional ethical boundaries. This period set a trajectory toward a presidency defined by confrontation with established institutions, personalized power, and a willingness to challenge the foundations of democratic governance. A dictatorship can only form in a weakened democracy. Now is the time to prove we don't have one. Resist, organize, educate. Our democracy depends on it. Thank you.